It is the latest and arguably the most potent of the Saintly Nurse type series that's been in Medarot ever since its foundings in Medarot 1 on 1997. It is NAS05, Charles de Nurse, with the kits of Perfect Guard, Field Repair, Revive, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of White Mage, which buffs all leg stats minus armor and heavy limit for every healing skill used at 10% per use, stacking 5 times. Now, as another model of the Resident NAS series, it was kind of expected that this particular model would sport not just the soft pink and white color scheme, but also a very dominantly support, defense, and healing-based kit, as expected of her predecessors. Saint Nurse, arguably as the most iconic of the NAS type series, is most certainly no exception to this, and Charles de Nurse here most certainly does not step far away from her family tree in what she brings to the table. Perfect Guard on the head, and our arguably titular skill among the Nurse type series, is a defense attribute skill that, upon use, will place Charles de Nurse on the center line to intercept any and all incoming attacks for 2 charges. In addition to this, she will not only nullify the damage to 0, but also basically serve as a free shield to allow her allies that extra time to breathe, so that because nothing can touch them. The only real breaks to this is the fact that A, it does have only 2 charges when fully capped, so she can only tank 8 blows. But do also beware that if anyone does have Deathlock or Defense Seal on the team, this is rendered entirely useless. In addition, because it is a standard shield and Charles de Nurse does not meta change, this does also mean she can be stopped or countered by anyone that brings Destroy to the table, which will insta-kill the head and render her as the healer entirely out of commission. Field Repair on the right arm is a healing skill that, contrary to most other standard healing skills like Repair or Super Repair, which heal based on the efficacy and level of the healing skill on the metal, Field Repair bases a large chunk of its healing capability not just on that, but also on how well the legs match with the terrain that she's fighting on. So that means, naturally, if you're on a terrain of A rank or better, and you have a good healing match on your metal, you're going to get a pretty good chunk of healing back every time she uses it. Whereas if you're maybe a C rank or lower, you probably will not be getting much, if any at all, because she's struggling to be able to find that sweet spot so that she can provide the best healing possible. Revive on the left arm allows her to restore all broken parts on an intact ally at the same time. Now, contrary to Rebirth, which revives a fallen ally, and Restore or First Aid or All Restore, which only restores 1 part per action, Revive, on the other hand, restores all broken parts to use at 10% each. So say, for instance, if her ally is just barely hanging on there with just the head part remaining, one use of this, arms and legs are instantly restored back to 10% HP, and she can always go back and heal them on her next turn with Field Repair to keep them back in the fight very easily. The only drawback to Revive is if the ally goes down and is knocked out, then she cannot revive them. Revive requires the ally to still be active on the field in order to receive the restoration and the healing. Biped Legs means that she'll have pretty good and diverse coverage across most terrains, as bipeds do tend to have the most diverse coverage, as mentioned, but it also, when it comes to stats, she's packing not just some rather thick thighs there, but some very good armor to match the look as well. With a base mobility of 823, she's most certainly going to be cooking on the speed, and will definitely not be at a loss for that before any other modifiers come into play. An evade of 737 isn't the highest, but she will be able to hold her own decently well with dodging or grazing when she feels like it. But a lot of the chunk that goes into Charles de Nurse is in fact her bulk. And I'm not just talking about her thighs again here or her arms, but just the fact of her resist stats as well. With a melee resist of 1530 and a shoot resist of almost 1400, she's definitely chalking up on the lines of boss type territory there, as being able to tank blows both up close and at range without either of them taking her down too quickly. And when it comes to the bulk, her armor is most certainly no exception to this rule either. With a head HP of about 3900, right arm about 3750, left arm at 3600, and legs at 4600, very healthy HP pool and more or less what you'd expect of a healer type like her to hold on to. being able to tank blows before she goes down, and be able to restore healing and basically serve as that bulk to sponge blows while she's healing everyone else, while still not leaving herself exactly high and dry. Plus, White Mage also does synergize with her kit very nicely, as it does mean that every time she uses Field Repair or Revive, she will get faster, just a little bulkier, and more likely to dodge or graze the up to 5 stacks, which is up to a 50% more than what she has just based on these numbers alone. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I still do have to rate Charles de Nurse pretty highly at an 8 out of 10. She synergizes with herself very nicely between Field Repair, Revive, and White Mage. Perfect guard there, and non-heavy at that, might I add, is a very solid use to anyone that does need to implement a shield somewhere in their kit, and is not at risk of the enemy packing Destroy or Deathlock or anything like that, and having 8 full charges that she can block between her 4 head uses is also pretty hard to argue against as well. Plus, Field Repair, if you have it on the right terrains, can be immensely useful as well for that emergency healing. Revive for keeping your allies in the game, even if it does keep their HP low at 10%, Field Repair can restore that back pretty quickly on her next turn, and White Mage only just amplifies that, making her faster and bulkier and more likely to heal you a lot sooner. As mixed parts, I do have to rate her very equally as well at an 8 out of 10, given that she does synergize with herself pretty nicely as expected of most nurse types as well. Charles de Nurse takes it kind of a step further in the fact that, much like most of the others like say Saint Nurse, even if you find that you can't really use the arms relatively easily because there are other modes for healing or keeping parts alive, the head and the legs are probably going to be the 2 really big parts you want to shoot for or make use of if you plan to capitalize on Charles de Nurse. A non-heavy Perfect Guard is arguably pretty hard to argue against, so I'm not going to provide any kind of argument toward that one. And very bulky female legs that are not just heavy but also fast and can also support up to 2 heavy parts means that you can use her pretty reliably whether as mixed parts or as a pure set without any major draw to her performance. A minor note to add as well, given that both of her arms are heavy, it does mean that she is just a little susceptible to heavy punish from anyone using Break or Break Hammer or any kind of gravity attribute skill. So a little word of advice and caution is encouraged if you are going to be making use of this chunky healer on your team.